He was on stages. He built a global movement. He authored over a dozen books and was featured on Sid Roth. He launched a very successful global Bible school that helped leaders all around the world. But in 2018, that all came crashing down. The school shut down, his ministry was dissolved, his voice went silent. He couldn't even attend his own annual conference. Just like that, he was done. He had fallen. He had lost his reputation. Hi, welcome to the Destiny Awaits podcast. I am your host, Andrea John, and this is a place where we uncover our identity, discover our purpose, and step into the destiny that God has waiting for us. And the conversation that we're going to have today does just that. Before Mike and I go back into the Jesus Speaks series for the Sermon on the Mount, I decided to put this episode here because I didn't want to break up the series again after we resume it. And this conversation really is a great way to kind of pave us into what's next, where we talk about that phrase in the Lord's Prayer that says, "Lead us not into temptation." And between today's episode and next week's episode, I think you'll understand why that is. So, who is this guest? Some of you may already know him. Some of you, indifferent to him. Some may have no clue who we're talking about. But some of you borderline hate him. No matter where you are in the spectrum of feelings about this person, this conversation is for you. Because it's not just about a fall. It's about that slow, quiet climb back up the road. The difficult one, the one that requires hard work, the one that people are rooting for you not to take. It's about looking in the mirror and owning who you are and what you've done. It's about taking ownership and responsibility for your actions and the pain that you've caused others. It's about doing the necessary work and rediscovering what it means to be human, what it means to be a man or a woman, what it means to be a leader with humility, integrity, and purpose. Maybe you're someone who's suffered at the hands of someone with narcissistic personality disorder. This conversation is for you. Maybe you're that person struggling to keep relationships, being told that you're a certain way or you're hurting people and you don't understand why or what they're talking about. This conversation, it's for you. While I am someone that has suffered at the hands of abuse, I find this man's story so inspirational and so full of hope. As someone who has mentored and led people, I can tell you that his story is uncommon. It is rare. It is not perfect. He has failed along the way. He got better and then he went down. He's going to tell you his story. But I find it so full of hope. And while it's uncommon and while it's rare, I love that I have this story to go back to because it allows me to help other people. It is something that I always have in the back of my mind that when I'm counseling someone, a couple, a group of people, I can say, I've seen it happen and I believe it can happen again. So if you're looking for that hope, or maybe you're looking for that help, I want you to join in on this conversation and take a listen into what it takes for someone to heal, recover, and find their way back after such a public and devastating fall. So let's welcome Dr. Jonathan Welton. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Destiny Awaits podcast. I'm your host, Andrea John, and today we have an uber special guest that I'm excited to have with us. His name is Dr. Jonathan Welton. Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan.
Oh, it's an honor. We've talked about this for a long time, and I'm excited to finally sit down and get into it.
Yes. So you may know who Jonathan is, but if you don't, you are going to wish you've known about Jonathan, but you're going to get to know him a little bit more today and in a very unique and intimate way because I think we're going to have an amazing conversation. I met Jonathan, well, I learned of Jonathan in 2017 or 18. I watched a YouTube video. Actually, no, I met you before, but I'll talk about this first. There was a YouTube video that Jonathan had out there about Matthew 24. And Matthew 24, if you don't know, is about, people usually attribute it to the end times. And my husband heard this video first, and then I heard it. And the amount of freedom that we received from this video was massive. And then we shared that video with someone else who was a teenager at the time. And when he heard it, his reaction was crazy. Like he was like the level of free, almost like this big weight on our shoulders was lifted.
Hmm.
And that is what then turned us on to Jonathan, listening to his teachings and getting more familiar with him. I then realized that before that video, I had heard from Jonathan because I was looking up stuff about women in ministry.
Ah.
And there's a video out there. And I remember my husband's very supportive of women. Like we just had this conversation yesterday, but I had heard this video that you taught. I don't know which passage it was on, but I was like, okay, I can get behind this. And I showed it to Mike, and he was just not that into it. And then it's funny because when we heard the Matthew 24 video, like it was Jonathan, right? And he actually signed up for your school.
That's right. That's right.
So he signed up for the school and he was all geared up to join and start. We were so excited. And there was an annual conference that we were planning to go at. And right before that conference, crazy things happened. And we went, and unfortunately, Jonathan was not at the conference, which was a bummer with all the circumstances going on. Danny Silk was there as well, and that was the first time I met Harold Eberly.
Hmm.
I remember I had read Danny Silk's Keep Your Love On, completely changed everything for me. So I was getting into him too. And Mike was talking to Danny Silk. He called me over, and I'm not a really starstruck person. So I was just like, okay, I was more interested in the bookstore because I wanted to see the books. But what was crazy was we're in Dunkin' Donuts and we're at the counter, and I look over and I literally punch Mike, and I'm like, Mike, look who's over there. And it was Jonathan. And what got him laughing was you didn't care one iota that Danny Silk was there talking to me, but you wanted to meet Jonathan, and there was all that drama going on with Jonathan. But I don't know, it was weird because I always sensed something about you, and even though I had the feeling what was being said about you was true, I was just like, I think he's going to be able to come out of this. Like he needs to pick himself up and he needs to figure this out and fix it. And I feel like he's done a great job, and he's been very, very vulnerable over the years. It's been many years, many, many years since
It took
then.
a while. It took a while.
Took a while. So, with that very ambiguous story, Jonathan, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and introduce to us whatever it is that you want to share?
Yeah, that's a fun intro. I mean, it really for somebody who isn't familiar with me at all, if whoever that is that's watching, they must be like, what are we talking about?
I
So
know, right?
so yeah, I used to run a Bible school called Welton Academy from 2013 to 2018. In 2017, I had my staff started to confront me. They were bringing things to my attention saying, "Hey, you're not okay. The way you're treating people is not okay." you're crossing boundaries, you're saying things that are inappropriate, we're not comfortable. There was all this stuff that was being brought to my attention, and I was not handling it. I was not listening. I was not taking ownership. I would take just enough ownership to make them leave me alone. And, classic leader narcissist kind of thing. And so I was doing that through 2017, and then in 2018 it just kept going, and I reached out to Danny Silk and I said, because we had a little bit of relationship, I said, "Can you get involved?" And so we invited him into this process, and he talked to everybody and kind of came back with the conclusion, "Yeah, Jonathan, you're the problem." And so we're gonna need to go through a process and address this stuff. And it's so interesting. I think back because the emotions of the people I've hurt have really changed over the years. Because at first, that first year or two, they wanted Danny to walk with me through a process. They wanted to keep Walton Academy going and like send you away, you go somewhere, and this is helping people, it's blessing people, it's freeing people, it's like dramatically changing lives. Let's keep this going. Let's rename it Better Covenant Academy. Like they wanted to keep this thing going and just have me go get healing. And they cared and they wanted to see me restored. So that was an amazing start to the process. Um, the challenge was the issues for me were so deep and I couldn't see them. And that's a huge thing of lack of self-awareness. I got there's a test that you can take where you get tested for like personality stuff. And so for me, this test rates you on a scale of 0 to 120. And if you're anything over an 80, you're in the narcissist zone. And so I was at
Okay.
81. So I was like,
Okay.
all right, I got a pinky toe in narcissism. Like I'm diagnosed that way. So the lack of self-awareness, the lack of ownership, playing the victim, blame shifting, gaslighting, deflecting, defending, the whole gamut was my life. It was my marriage, it was my way of doing ministry and leadership. And so we started heading down this road, and oh, it was a matter of the first 2 years of me doing counseling, doing 12-step programs, doing all kinds of things to try to fix this. And by the summer of 2020, my wife says, "We need to separate because this is not working and you haven't changed and you've worked your tail off." Like she wasn't saying, "Hey, you sat on the couch and I don't trust you." She was saying, I've watched you work really hard and you still are kind of an a-hole. So that's a problem. So this isn't gonna work. And so it was really tough because it was like starting back at zero at that point. And I'm like, I have tried everything I know to try. I've put in the work and I'm still here. Where do I go next? And that was at that point that I was watching these little free videos from this program called The Bulletproof Husband.
Mm-hmm.
The Bulletproof Husband is a secular organization for men who are going through separations and divorces to help them fix their relationship through fixing themselves. I found so many kingdom principles in this program that I had never learned in church. Concepts and understandings that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so biblical. Why are we not teaching this? And it made a profound difference. It actually went from my wife's therapist that she was meeting with told her at the beginning of the summer in 2020, "I've worked with men like your husband for 40 years. They never change. You should prepare for divorce." Very practical, very logical. And then by the end of the summer, the same therapist, is saying to her, "I don't know what they did at that men's group, but it's like a miracle. And your husband has done everything I didn't expect him to do.
Right.
Take ownership, be humble, clean up his mess, rebuild trust." Like, so by the end of the summer, I she invited me back in and we restored our relationship and began moving forward. And it's been just uphill ever since. And so we're 5 years down the road. I actually was invited to go through the first batch of men to be trained as coaches in the program. And then they invited me to be the top coach over the whole program. So that was over 25 other coaches and over 800 men in the membership. And then they asked me to write the book for the program. So
Yep.
I was very involved. And so for about 3 years, I helped men with their narcissism, with their issues, with their deep emotional woundings that was ruining their families and their marriages. And so I've been over here in this world of men, masculinity, marriage, and it's really such a shift because I went from that being such a broken area in my life and such the absolute weakest area. And I lived in my head and my theology, and I've written 15 books, and I've taken teams of students on archaeological tours around the Mediterranean, and I've done all these things and had a Bible school. And now I'm on the phone with, some pastor of a church of 200, and he's playing the victim, and his wife wants to leave him, and he's saying, we have a sexless marriage, and it's all her fault and I'm the victim here. And it's like, all right, let's get into this. Let's dig into your issue here. And at the core of it, when you're dealing with men, is getting them back in touch with, you are the leader.
Yep.
That means you have to be responsible. Responsible. And that feels, especially when you're stuck in victim, it feels like, well, but it's not my fault. And people get that confused. They mix up fault and responsibility, and they want to shift the blame. And we see it with Adam in the garden, right? Blame shifting from day one. Like,
Yep.
was that woman you gave me? So we've been blame shifting forever. And yet, hey, you're responsible for the garden. If she ate the fruit, you're responsible, bro. Like your house is not in order. You have to own everything as the
Right.
leader. And that is just a concept I never have really heard in church about responsibility or how to rebuild trust. Those two were probably some of the biggest keys that I feel like is missing in our whole process when we're exposing ministers and we're calling people out and we're saying, well, you need to repent and go through restoration. But we don't ever talk about what that entails, which is responsibility and rebuilding trust. And those are some of the biggest foundations that I feel like now are something unique that I can help bring back to the church from this men's world that I've been in.
Yeah, I mean, you know a little bit about my story, and some of the listeners do. So I was in an abusive relationship for a long time, and looking back now, there's a lot of those tendencies. I think the word narcissist is overused a little bit today. Like we like to call everything narcissism and narcissist. um but there are some tendencies that I can look back and be like, okay, yeah, I see that was there.
Mm.
And I but my experience, and I attribute this to God, is a lot of people have been through what I've been through. They come out of it and they become men haters,
Mm.
right? Like all men. And there was a time where I would say, no man is capable of monogamy. They're all, like this, and they all, ego and all this stuff. But when I met Mike, we were friends first. And it took a lot for me to even agree to be in a relationship with him. So much so that after he told me about his feelings for me, I didn't quite respond the way he wanted to. At some point I did feel from God, like, if you go that route, I'm with you regardless.
Mm.
And when I went and told Mike, okay, I want to be in this relationship, I actually was shaking and crying
Mm.
because I was scared, but I really did feel like God was with me. And Mike has always demonstrated to me what I call like First Corinthians love, like God kind of love.
Mm.
So I encountered God as love in part, I believe, because someone was finally demonstrating to me what it looked like. And what that did too was cause me to realize there are good men out there, and not all men are garbage or pigs. And I would tell people all the time, If you're constantly telling men they're pigs, what are they going to behave like? Pigs. If you're constantly telling women they're female dogs, what are they going to behave like? Right. So we have to call people up into who God created them to be, not ignore or deny reality, but also recognize like this is God's creation. This is how he created it. Let's bring people up there. So when all of that stuff came out in 2018 about your story, and I was on the outside because we weren't in the school yet. So there's a lot of details that we don't know about.
Right, right.
Um, and along the path, you were an exception to my rule because generally what they were telling Karen about, there's no way that, he's not going to change, you can't change. I have, and with all these years of ministry experience, I can say that it's very difficult to see people change. But for some reason, with your story, I had this hope. And I don't know if it's so that I would pray for you. I don't know what the deal
Mhm.
was, but I had the hope. And I had heard your teaching. So I was like, he knows. Like you would talk about, for example, how the relationship between females and males, right? Like that sisterly bond. You would talk a lot about how we are supposed to be a family, like even beyond a community, like a family, and we need to respect and honor each other. So, and you wrote the book Culture of Honor. So it was like he knows
I
all the things.
That's Danny's book.
Oh, not Culture of Honor. You wrote,
Eyes of Honor. Eyes of
yeah,
Honor.
Eyes of Honor, which I haven't read. I've read lots of your books, but that
Sure.
one I didn't read.
Yeah.
But I know about it.
Yeah.
So I knew you knew this stuff, and I felt like you had the chutzpah in you to maybe get past yourself a little bit. And I didn't know you like that, but I just had this feeling. And I really root for people. I've tried to counsel people through this type of personality.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I don't know how Danny Silk does it. I don't have the patience for it. Probably because I get triggered, which being honest, like I get triggered. There are times where I'm going to be honest with everyone. Jonathan posts things that I'm like, oh, Jonathan. But
I get emails once in a while.
oh, I'm sure like nothing, there's never going to be, no one's going to agree with us 100%. But I also can say that there are times where you have posted something or whatnot, and then you elaborate a little bit. And I realize, like, okay, I didn't fully follow what you were saying. And it's the same thing for me. There's things that you can't articulate in one sentence or a Facebook post. It's
Right.
very complex.
Yeah.
Okay, you, so Karen confronted you that summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And in addition to all that work, so you had been going through work, it was a hard, hard road. Why do you think that the Bulletproof Husband made that shift for you? And is there anything else that you attribute that big shift? Because I think all
Yeah.
of it contributed to your change. Like, I think it was building and mounting, but like, why do you think that particular concept, and you're with them till today, so it had a huge impact?
Yeah. Yeah. Goodness, there's several answers to that. So if I go back, from 2018 to 2020, I'm going through this process with Danny. And I mean, to put it in perspective, Danny Silk is sitting down doing Zoom calls with my wife and I every week for 2 years at this point. And even with that, I mean, to me, Danny Silk is like you've made it to the top of the mountain and you're talking to the guru. Like that's that in that realm. Like some people probably think of James Dobson that way with Focus on the Family. I think of Danny that way when it comes to relationship and
Me too.
marriage, like top of the mountain. And if he can't help me avoid ending up in another separation and head toward divorce, I'm like, I've tried everything. I mean, I've gone and talked to the guru and we're still in trouble here. And it wasn't just that, but the all the other things that I had tried at that point. So I felt like I had wiped out all the resources of what else is there to even try. And so the spring of 2020, it was multiple things. Because if we remember, we have the COVID lockdown starting. So that's March of 2020. My wife and I live in New York State. So you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You're stuck in this house. There's piles of snow everywhere because it's Rochester, New York. And everything's locked down and everything is like terrifying. The world's about to end. You know, everybody's on the beginning of the pandemic and we're freaked out. And inside of that, um, some things had happened at my local church, and my local pastor had decided, I'm done with this. I'm done with this process. You're excommunicated. And he got a couple board members together and they signed a paper. And this guy was my best friend before all this. And so this went from, betrayal, excommunication, all of those feelings
That's
came
tough.
in. It was rough. So I'm like,
Loss of community is one of it. Loss of community can be more depressive than loss of spouse.
whew, wow. I could believe that. So it was really like, okay, now you've been kicked out of church. Um, there were some staff members that decided to put out some blogs, and so some blogs had started to circulate. And for the first 2 years, there hadn't been. They quietly waited, hoping that Danny's stuff would work. Then they got frustrated that it wasn't working and decided to go a different route. And so that was like the first wave of, here's some blogs and here's an excommunication and your wife is saying you need to separate and you'll never change. And I mean, it was piles of weight. So I add those to say, that what I see with men is they only change as much as they're pressured to. And I know that sounds so wrong. What do you mean pressured to? Well, the external pressure of, hey, you're 300 pounds and you just had a heart attack. Now you're going to get your weight in order. Even though we've been telling you for 10 years that you're going to have a heart attack, now you've had the heart attack. Now you've had the quadruple bypass. Now you're going to start walking every day and do carnivore diet. Now you're going to get yourself in order. Like you're going to fix this thing finally. So, and I see this with men all the time. And I was that man. And we call it the slap. It's you've getting the slap from your wife or from your boss or from whatever slaps you in life to wake you up. Well, I had slap after slap after slap in the spring of 2020, which was a huge wake up call. Inside of that too, I had a in-law. I'm going to be careful how I say this because there's just legal stuff involved. But
Mhm.
I have an in-law, one of my siblings' spouse, who reached out to me and said, um, they've been prostituting me on the internet. And I was the one who was tasked by the rest of my family. You need to call and confront and address this. And I did. And they admitted, yes, this is what's happening.
Wow.
And then about 3 weeks later, everybody else in the family, including them, turn on me. Now I go from, hey, maybe I could help this person and I'm going to confront them and we're going to try to walk in this direction to, no, you're the bad guy now because you shined a light on something. And so my family, it boils down. I mean, even that summer, it was my mother and my siblings working together to try to get CPS to take our children away from us. They were
Wow.
calling and calling and calling. We had social workers showing up for all these dumb appointments. They would take anything off of social media and go, there, we can make a case around this somehow. And they would call it in. Like one point one of my kids had eaten like a whole bunch of multivitamin gummies. And
Mhm.
so Karen posted about it like humorously, and And she had called poison control. They said, "Oh, it's nothing. It's totally fine. It's just a bunch of
Do you
gummies."
know how many kids do that? I did
Oh,
that. I used to do the Flintstone vitamins. I love them.
oh man, I would get Tums from my I was like, oh, but yeah, no, I just it was bonkers because they took that and got a social worker involved and like, are your kids safe? And they're not, being taken care of. And they're, it was, they would take anything and try to use that. And at the same time, the FBI is involved in investigating this thing going on with my sibling, and I have to testify against them. And so I'm like, now I'm 5 years no contact with any member of my family. I went through being excommunicated from my church. That was the church. I mean, we love this church. We donated like crazy
Yeah.
to this church. We were so involved. Yeah, our heart was in it. So 2020 was like a meat grinder, like just being put through a wood chipper. And
COVID
um,
was the least of your problems.
it was like,
That was
it's
like
kind of
for
nice the
me.
world shut down. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was the same thing. We had all this stuff going on, and COVID for us was almost a blessing because it allowed us to stay under the radar and be protected in a way because no one was out doing anything. So I
Mm,
can relate to that.
yeah. Yeah. 2020. Wow. So after I gotten the Bulletproof Husband, it was like, oh, now I have a community. So that was
Mhm.
a big restoration for me of I have some people, and um I would call and I'd talk to 4 or 5 different men a day and just connect and talk and dig into this whole thing. And I'd never had male friends. Like my ministry was all these female staff members. And so for me to develop male friendships and be open and honest and raw was a whole different planet for me,
Mhm.
and so good. And so I dug into that like crazy. I really began to do the emotional work that was needed to make the changes. And but that pressure, I guess that's the core answer to your question, was the pressure of that was put on in 2020 was so much more than anybody's really aware, because it's really not covered. It's not covered in the book Unpunishable by Danny, which Danny Silk wrote a book.
Yes.
The last 3 chapters are our story, but it's kind of a cliffhanger because he says, to walk through a restoration process, there's 5 different steps. And he basically says in the book, like, Jonathan's done the first 2 steps. I believe he'll do the rest. We'll see. And so it's kind of we'll see how this turns out.
I
Uh,
read the book right when it came out because I do enjoy Danny's teachings. They've keep your love like your and this is what I told you recently. What I learned from you really laid a foundation for everything, including keep your love on.
mm,
It's hard to explain why, but it did. It was very foundational. Keep Your Love On really helped me from a relational standpoint. And even with my situation that I'm going through with my ex,
yeah,
even in that, it's helped me because to keep your love on when someone continues to attack you over and over again, it doesn't look like what people think it should look like, you know? So it's helped me. So when Unpunishable came out, I read it. A lot of the similar concepts from Keep Your Love On.
yeah,
I had known you by this point, so I got the book because of Danny, but it was interesting to read your story in it because I now knew a little bit about it. I do remember that not everybody was happy about him writing about you. The book, I did not ever get the sense like he's saying this is closed, this is good, this is done. But for some reason, some people did interpret it as permission for you to continue on with ministry or whatnot. I didn't take it that way. I read it for what it actually said,
yeah,
just demonstrating. And like you said, it is a little bit of a cliffhanger with your story because people didn't get to kind of see how all those steps worked. Um, and he was there, I think, but I think if I'm not mistaken, he's not in it with you right now. But I do think that your story is, I think it's an exception, to be honest.
At the
Um,
moment, it is. Yes.
but I think that you model what it may look like, right? And I think the one thing I would tell everyone is it takes time. When someone grows up a certain way for years and years and years, thinking and believing and behaving a certain way, it took years to get there. It's like weight loss. You don't just put on the weight overnight. So to expect it to come off overnight is unrealistic. You have to take the time, right? New habits need to happen. And you have a lot of thought processes and beliefs where everything you believe is built on something from when you were a child. And I know that you had to encounter some things that you went through when you were a child. And even though your theology was great and you were helping tons of people, like you were saying, people wanted you to keep the school open. I
Yeah.
was one of those people because to me it was okay, so he messed up, but what he taught was good. Like you're not going to go throw out what he taught. But I think that's why I was such a cheerleader for you because you did teach good things. And I was like, no, this is going to taint that message. And it
Yeah.
did bring a lot of freedom, but it really takes time, and in a way that that pressure that you have, I also think it was pressure, but you also had people around you that were no longer coddling you.
Yeah.
You lost everything, everyone, all your community, right? Mike went through the same thing. He lost all his community at one point because he was raised in what some would consider a cult. He lost all his community. You're forced then to kind of confront things where some people uh they don't. They continue to have family and friends that make excuses for them, and then it makes it very hard for them to change because, oh, I can just stick with these people, they're okay with it. So no, so to your point, pressure and the loss that you endured really made you be like, either I need a change or I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life.
That is what it boiled down to. Because I'm looking at it going, gosh, if I can't, I mean, it's gonna end up just me and Danny having Zoom calls by ourselves with nobody trusting me. Like that's gonna be it. Like it really, it was burning down. And I gosh, that separation in 2020, um, when I moved out, at the same time, all this chaos is going on with my family. So I'm not going to go live at my parents' house in a guest room or something like that. I don't have a sibling to go to. Like, I now have walls and boundaries to say, my kids and myself, we are going to have no contact with these people. My friends are part of the church, so I've lost all these relationships. There was like one buddy that I'd go to a movie with. Like it had gotten to that point, and now I have to get out. And so, gosh, I don't even know how, but somehow some friend that was from years before who lived an hour away, she said, I have a guest room in my attic and you can go stay up there. It's filled with storage and stuff, and you can come stay in my attic, third floor." Like, whatever, that'll work. And so here I am, mattress on the floor in an attic, an hour away from Karen and the girls. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd drive home, I'd help out with the kids, help through the day, make meals, do dishes, say, "Okay, thanks for having me." And I would get back in the car and drive an hour back.
That's
And
tough.
it was a rough summer of, I mean, just you're like, I have got to figure this out because I do not want my kids to grow up in a broken home. I have got to change. I don't know how to change. I've worked my tail off to try to change. I've got nothing left. I am rock, rock, rock bottom at this point. And to really find these tools in the men's program, a huge part of it is we call it doing the emotional work. And it would be similar. I guess nowadays people are a little more familiar with like EMDR.
Yeah.
That's gotten out there a little bit more, but in the masculine work, what I never had happen inside of inner healing, like inner healing, you go back to a memory, maybe it's really traumatic. You're gonna invite Jesus in, maybe you're gonna cry a little bit. You're gonna change the story and find a lie and a truth and
Mhm.
this whole thing. It's all in your head, and it may be in your heart too, in your spirit. But what needs to happen for most men, and what I desperately needed to happen, was to go back to the traumatic memory and grieve, actually grieve out the pain. And we never talk about grieving, even though we got a
Yeah.
whole book of the Bible called Lamentations. We ignore this. And so you stuff all this. And I think of Ephesians, where he says, uh, be angry, do not sin, do not let the sun go down on your wrath, and don't give foothold to the devil. Well, those go together. He's saying essentially, don't stuff your feelings. It's not, hey, stay up till 4 in the morning arguing with your spouse. Like that's how we've
Right.
taken it. Like we're not supposed to go to bed until we finish this argument. That's not what he's saying. He's saying don't stuff the anger, because that's what we do. We do it for decades and we build it all up instead of processing it. He says, be angry, but don't sin. So now
Yeah.
handle it responsibly. And then the third one, don't give foothold to the devil, which I believe those footholds come from unprocessed pain. So I had all kinds of footholds all over me that were from unprocessed pain that had never been grieved. Many, many suns had gone down on many, many hurts and had never gotten out. And so they teach the practicality of how to be angry and not sin, how to responsibly handle those feelings, the best $75 I ever spent was to go buy a punching bag off Facebook Marketplace. It was the best therapy money I ever did, because every time I'd get triggered by something, I'd be talking with Karen and I'd feel a wall come up, I'd feel a hurt, something. I'd say, excuse me, I need to go do some work. Oh, okay. And I would just disappear instead of putting up a wall, instead of arguing, defending, deflecting, all that stuff that I would have done, shutting down, pulling away. That was a big one for me. The the warning light just went off. I got to go do something. And I would take that and I'd walk away and I would wail on the punching bag, get through the feeling that I'm feeling in the moment, and get further down into, I'm feeling this feeling here that's taking me back to 6 years old when I felt like that with my sisters, with my mom, with my brother, and grieve and cry that thing out. And I'd come, half an hour of sweat, tears, probably blood sometimes on the punching bag and in a circle on my garage floor all around it, until I'm laying on the garage floor completely spent and going, I got it out like that. I've carried that for decades. And I did that basically every 3 days. And I did it every 3 days because then I would take throat coat tea and cough drops and everything I needed to like restore my throat, because I would go until I'd gotten it out. And
So
that usually,
you
yeah.
basically became a whole human. You know, a lot, and what I mean by that is a lot of times Christian, like you mentioned, inner healing and things like that. Oftentimes Christians separate the physical from the spiritual. And in my search of God, getting to know who He is, part of that was also understanding who I am, or who humans are. Who are we designed to be? And Christians often see, oh, for example, oh, that's the worldly side of Jonathan, or that's the earthly side of Jonathan or me or whatever. And they separate, oh, he just needs to be one with Christ, he just needs to think of Christ, and it's like, no, God created us as human beings, body, soul, spirit, or body, soul, spirit, whatever. There's different ways to look at it. When we deny the physical, we're denying God's creation. We cease to be human when we ignore our body, and it's dishonoring to God when we say, oh, our bodies don't matter. So the whole punching bag thing, Jonathan, that's just the worldly thing. That's your, earthly way of handling things. But when we create thoughts, when we have memories, whether it's positive or negative, those memories actually get stored in our cells, in our body physically. So
Yes.
when you then align those emotions with physical expression, Tony Robbins kind of talks about this too in a certain way. You're aligning your body as one, and that's how you shed it, because you were taking the emotional work, the mental work, what was in your cells, and you're like, you're healing, you're reframing, you're doing all the things that people talk about, right? Dr. Carolyn Leaf talks about that too.
Yeah.
And you just combined it all. And that, in my opinion, that really is where healing comes in. There's people who are, for example, against yoga, and there's certain types of yoga or studios that, yeah, I'm not a big fan of, because they do go a little bit into wacky town. But I have been in a yoga class that's purely physical and started crying in class out of nowhere. And I wasn't thinking about anything. It's just, I really believe that, for example, like on hip openers and stuff, my body was starting to shed something. So then, instead of being ignorant to what's happening, I understand. And then I would ask God, can you please show me what's happening right now? So I could align the emotional side of me and the physical side, and then heal from those things. And it really made a big difference. And what I hear you saying is basically that you learned how to take your whole being and be like, I'm going to heal. I'm going to heal as a human being and be the best version of myself. So you align the emotion, the mental, and the physical. That's awesome. I think that's something the church doesn't talk enough about.
It's so true. I think of a friend that I was working with who he was over 500 pounds. And as we were talking through things, I said, listen, man, you're not carrying 500 pounds of fat. You're carrying 500 pounds of unprocessed emotions. And he
Yeah.
was like, what? But
You're
that's
crazy.
this is our reality. And we see it with pastors. We see all these big fat pastors, and it's like you've lopsided your life. Now, I didn't lopside my life in hyper spirituality. I've had seasons in the past where it was like fasting and
Right.
praying in tongues all the time and just, everything spiritual, build those spiritual muscles and getting lopsided. Most of my adult life was more lopsided into the intellectual. I'm going to
Okay,
read
I could
all
see
these
that.
books. I'm
Hmm.
going to write a bunch of books. I'm going to be the smartest charismatic in the world and whatever, And so I had leaned hard into that intellect side. And it was at the avoidance of my emotional world and not having a healthy emotional world and not even knowing what that could possibly look like because of what I grew up with. And even not even recognizing what I grew up with. Like you talk to a lot of people who, adults who are like, "Oh yeah, I grew up in a drug household," or my parents were divorced and that messed me up, or they have some grip on this. I didn't. I was like, my parents met and married at Bible school. I was homeschooled. I grew up in this lovely family. Like I had this rosy picture. And it wasn't until one of the treatments that I did earlier in 2020, they put all these electrodes on your scalp. It's a thing called
Hmm.
Cereset, and it helps people in the military with PTSD or insomnia. It's a way that regulates the frequencies in your brain. Well, one of the side effects that's positive that you can have sometimes is memory coming back. And so in my case, I had before this, every time I'd sit down with a counselor, it was like, hey, I don't really remember anything before about 14 years old. And they would be like, well, this can be hard to do some counseling because that's usually most everything is in your formative years and you
Yeah.
can't remember anything. Well, that's usually a massive sign, red flag of trauma. but I didn't know what the trauma was. And so they hook these electrodes up and I start having memories come back. And I'm checking in. I'm still talking at that point with my siblings. And so I'm checking with them and they're like, "How did you forget that?" Yes, that
Oh,
happened
wow.
and
So
that
they
happened.
remembered, but you didn't.
They had,
Interesting.
yes, yes. And I mean, one of them is diagnosed and takes medication for bipolar. She remembered everything in detail. So it's like, okay, that makes sense. That's part of how you got where you got. And it's, yeah. So one of the things that came back was that my mom was actually arrested when I was a young teenager for child abuse. That was how out of
Oh,
control the physical abuse was in our home. Now, a lot of people they have like sexual abuse in their childhood and then they
hmm.
repress it. None of that came up. I didn't have repressed sexual stuff,
Okay.
but repressed physical violence. And so much of it that was um my mom's never gotten treatment for anything, but I would say she'd fall in the category of borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
It's kind of like narcissism for women, but it's a little more unstable. You know, a
Hmm.
narcissist has patterns that are very predictable.
Yeah.
Borderline is not predictable because
Well,
they can
it's
go
almost
from,
like you're a different person
yeah,
and
like
then
I love
it's
you, I'm your best
unpredictable.
friend, to I hate you, get away from me, and like,
Yeah.
okay, wow. And so, borderline mother, codependent enabler father who's just a nice guy syndrome, and then a narcissist brother, a narcissist myself, and a borderline sister and a bipolar sister. So lots and lots of mental health stuff around me, and going, I've done talk therapy. You go in, you pay $150 for an hour, you sit there talking for 58 minutes. They say, "Here's a tiny little bit of homework for the week. Good luck." And you're like, "What was that?" Like, I'm never going to get anywhere with talk therapy.
I guarantee you, because I've looked into talk therapy, I've had some sessions that were helpful to me, but I've realized I'm a very logical person, as I believe you are, which is probably why you like to read and be smart, right? Because you're like trying to figure things out. But that meant that I also knew all of the therapy talk and I
Mhm.
knew what needed to be done. So a lot of times I would go into those sessions and I'm psychoanalyzing myself. And then my therapist would be like, "Why are you even here? Like, you
Mm.
don't need to be here." But then to your point, I was, uh, I had the intelligence to know what was happening, but not the emotional intelligence to make the shift and to realize.
Yeah. And I think that's what the big difference is. Like, we have the pastoral approach, we have the therapy approach. There's these different models. The therapy approach is we're going to sit here, we're going to talk about it, and maybe slowly, eventually, you could maybe possibly make changes. And we'll also, if you get a label like narcissism, it's unfixable and you're just stuck with it forever. Like, there's
You
kind of a
learn to
hopeless,
manage.
yeah, and so it's a hopeless end in the ending. And then in the pastoral model, it's like, we're gonna pray for you, we're gonna do some counseling. It's very gentle. There's that whole thing. But what I needed and what came along was the coaching model. Someone coming in like a personal trainer. And at the core of what people don't understand about The Culture of Honor by Danny Silk or Unpunishable by Danny Silk is the difference is punishment versus discipline.
Yes.
People get this confused because they think that what they're saying is no consequences. That's not what he's saying at all. He's saying the consequences are actually part of the challenge of you becoming disciplined. Or in the words of Jocko Willing, discipline equals freedom. That it's actually you're going to grow into freedom by being disciplined. Like, the more you put discipline in your life. So through the process, what we would typically do with somebody who's a fallen minister who's going through some sort of restoration, let's say, is we take them out of leadership, we put them over here, they're on timeout, and they're kind of in ministry jail for 3 years. And then, okay, you served your time. Now we put you back in ministry somewhere. Did that change anything? We don't know. But
Yeah.
maybe it will hinder you from ever doing it again, like throwing somebody in jail. Did they get rehabilitated? Probably not. The recidivism rate is massively high. They're likely to go back out and reoffend. So this is our typical approach is did we punish them enough with a timeout that then we can release them?
Well, then they're motivated by fear because they don't do that thing anymore because they're afraid of being caught again, not because they've actually transformed. And then when they go and do it again, everyone wonders why. Well, they weren't motivated by love or by God's design, they were motivated by fear. And
Yeah,
fear does not produce anything good, in my opinion.
it's a good point. It's a good parenting point too. Yeah. Like that's not the goal, is that our kids are afraid of doing something wrong because I'm going to be punished. It's that they choose not to because it's not who they are because they've disciplined themselves in something else.
Yep.
And that to actually get the coaching model where somebody comes in and okay, you've had the heart attack. Now we're here in the gym. We're going to lift these weights every day. We're going to burn all this off of you. We're going to build muscle. You're going to get strong. You're going to get healthy. And we'll never have another heart attack again like that. Right? Right. Okay. That is the actual way, the actual path. And we don't see that. And so we feel, essentially kind of hopeless when we hear about another crash and another crash and another crash from people because it's like, well, either I'm just going to keep trusting people or I'm going to give up trusting people instead of actually walk the process out. When you see, I personally, I've been super inspired by a man named David Goggins, and I'm
Mhm.
surprised how often people in the church have no idea who that is. And it makes
Well,
me
I could
feel,
tell you why. Because
yeah,
he uses foul language
says
and
naughty word.
people can't handle it.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's part of it. But my goodness, this man, he used to be over 300 pounds and just spraying for cockroaches at a pesticide company. And one day he saw a documentary about Navy SEALs and said, I want to do that. And he went to a recruiter and he said, you're going to age out before you could actually do it. You have 90 days and you will have to lose 106 pounds. And he's like, okay. And he figured it out. And he went and he did a calorie deficit where he ate 800 calories a day and worked out like 8 hours a day.
Yep.
And it was just that kind of mentality was the mentality that I took on that really helped me when it was like, okay, I am down in the dirt here, driving an hour, living in an attic, excommunicated, blogs on the internet about me. Everybody hates me. I am down in the dirt. And it was literally, I remember Karen and I had a thing and it was like, what are the feelings that hold you back the most? And I was like, hated. And she's like, what do you mean? Hated's not a feeling. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I feel
The hate.
hated. I feel hated. And yeah, it was that weight on me. And it was there for years. That was there for a few years. And that process of, but I'm going to push through this. And the key core of it was not so I can get back in ministry. The key core was for my kids. I have
Yeah.
three beautiful daughters that I do not want to grow up in a house like this. I don't want them to grow up in the house I grew up in. I don't want them to grow up in a broken house. I want to heal this thing so that my wife trusts me and feels safe, and my daughters have a thriving family to grow up in. This was my target. And I hit that target. And then it was, well, I'd like our family to be able to participate in a church and have that. And we hit that target and we moved out of state to down to Charlotte, which is something we had in our hearts always. We were like, we hope someday to end up down there. And so we finally moved down to Charlotte and became a part of a church down here. And then we were just members of the church for 3 years, and then recently, they asked me to speak for the first time on a Sunday morning, and laid hands on us and reinstated and recommissioned and spoke over us. And so, I mean, it's just been layer after layer of watching. Danny Silk says it this way, watching the rings of trust. Like the core trust is you and yourself. And then there's you and your spouse and your
Mhm.
kids and your church community and the extended community and maybe the people who never want to speak to you again, who still hate your guts. And like there's all these
Yeah.
rings, and it's just a process. And we're seeing the Lord just open up more and more over the course of the years. I mean, now it's, as we're talking now, it's been 7 years since that first thing went off. And um Danny, so I remember he said this privately to the board that was walking with me, like, either Jonathan is gonna walk this repentance thing and be open and honest with us, or we're gonna watch this thing like nuclearly explode from outer space.
Right.
And that was the path I chose at the beginning, and unfortunately.
But you
And
didn't realize it.
no, and I mean that's the nature of, like, I love how Paul says that, when you're a hypocritical liar, you have a seared conscience. He's
Yeah.
writing to Timothy, and that you're not going to feel anything if your nerves are burned. Like if you have seared your arm, you feel nothing.
Yeah.
I was totally clueless, oblivious to how I was treating people and how I was still trying to cover and hide and deceive and cover things over. And it's so easy to look at somebody like a narcissistic husband and say, it's all intentional. It's so intentional. And it's like, no, man, like that person has no clue how horrible they're being and how deceptive and self-deceived. Like they are blind to reality. And to this day, I still get emails from my father saying, I'm worried about you. I don't know if you're a Christian. I don't know if your soul is saved. I don't know if you're going to end up in
Mhm.
heaven. And I'm like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Like, you
Listen,
like I'm more of a Christian now than I've ever been in my whole life. Like, I love
we
Jesus. Like,
we
you're
get that too.
crazy.
Listen, with all the stuff that we do, we still get that. And it's because of certain beliefs, like to some people, because I do yoga, I'm going to hell, So it's,
Hey, yoga demon. Yep.
yeah, it's apparently Jesus, what Jesus did isn't strong enough. And when I go out into the world, there's a risk demons are going to attach to me. And
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion you
Yeah.
either believe Jesus did what he did or you don't. And I happen to believe very strongly and convictedly. But I can see what you're saying because, one of the things that me walking the opposite side of your journey and still to some degree being forced to have him in my life because he perpetuates this stuff through the legal system,
Yeah.
I do recognize that he doesn't see it. I know that,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So I have compassion for that. And then it almost stirs a little bit of little thing in me because then I'm like, why are the people around him not helping him? But
Mm,
that's not my responsibility, right?
right.
I can only take responsibility for me. The fruit of the spirit includes self-control, not control of others.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing we can do. And I think a lot of times, a lot of the things that we all struggle with, whether it's your story or my side of the story, what comes at the surface a lot of times is control. Because me being on the opposite side, I developed a bit of a controlling personality because it was my way to protect myself. And I also was worried about what people would say and what people would do. And I stayed as long as I did because I was worried about the perception and, all that stuff. And at some point in life, we all need to become mature enough where we say, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it matters what it is. What's the reality? Yes, perception is reality a lot of times. But when I'm talking about me, yes, perception matters, but ultimately what matters is what God's seeing. Can I stand before God completely open and transparent and say, God, look at me, flaws and all. And even if you're not perfect, which no one is, if you can stand before God in that way, I feel like you're going to be walking the best way possible because you're willing to confront those things.
Mm.
And that's what I try to do. I am someone that I feel Mike and I do want to talk about your leadership course or school that you're going to
Yeah.
open.
Yeah.
Mike and I, what we've discovered over the years, we have Jesus House, our ministry, and we're actually going to rebrand it. We're not a church. We've never been a church. People saw us as a church, and it was a little bit of a battle because we're like, we're not a church. We're more of an equipping center. And over time, I've been able to realize that what we are is an equipping center. We are leaders to leaders. And I feel like you are as well. One of the books I read of yours was Equipping the Equippers. That was an excellent book. I recommend everyone read that one. It's an easy read, but it opened up a lot for me in understanding gifts and how things work, understanding myself and other people. The other one is understanding the whole Bible. My focus is not good. This is a great one. Mike's read it like a million times. He uses it so much for when he teaches. He teaches at a recovery mission, and he actually uses this as a basis for everything that he teaches.
Wow.
And it has blown some minds. And one of the awesome things is to be at a place that helps people who struggle with addiction learn the freedom that comes from the better covenant theology
Yeah.
and change their lives, not be stuck in this cycle of I'm a sinner, I'm trying to overcome the sin, I'm a sinner, I'm trying to overcome the sin, but looking at like what you were talking about when you finally changed, you had a target. You and Karen had a target. You were like, this is about my girls and my wife, and I want them to trust me. You had that target, but when your target is I don't want to be this way, you're going to constantly look at that thing you don't want to be, and then you're going to struggle with it. So where are you looking? I forgot where it is, the passage that talks about it. I should know this because I've taught on it. The passage on endurance. We have to look at the finish line. We can't keep looking at the obstacles or the things that are in our way or our way of being. We need to, okay, this is my target. That's how, think about David Goggins. That's how he did it. He was like, I need to get to that. And that's what he was focused on. He wasn't focused on how much he weighed, how much he had to lose, what he needed to stop eating. He looked at, I need to lose this and I need to go there. That's my end goal. And that's what got him there. The other thing that the other book you wrote is the Better Covenant Commentary. This is a new piece of work that Jonathan did after he kind of came back into the public eye. And you're working on one in the Gospels, right?
I am. So that one in your hands is Acts to Revelation, and
Yes.
it's 800 pages. And then I'm working on the Gospels, which is going to be really interesting when we get it, because I'm partnering with somebody who what he did is he took the four Gospels and he blended them together
I have that
into,
book.
you do the four
You're
Gospels
working
in
with
one?
him?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so cool.
So he gave me the rights to his content, and then I'm adding my commentary. So it's going to end up being, you basically can read through the Christmas story, and then it gets into the water baptism, and you read through it, and it's chronological and it's smooth, and you get the whole story from every story. It's
Yeah.
really wild. He actually, N.T. Wright wrote a foreword for him. So, I mean, it's really well done what he did. And
Yeah. I
yeah,
have that because of Jordan Peterson. He mentioned him. I was listening to some of his expositions on the Daily Wire and they brought it up. And I was like, I need that. So I got it because it's a great way, especially for people who aren't familiar with the Bible, to read the story of Jesus. And then when I heard you were doing the Gospels, I was excited because I love the God. Like if there was something I would specialize in, it would be the Gospels because I love Jesus. Like to me, his life, to me, looking at his life, that's what we should live.
yes.
And I think a lot of people misinterpret it. Like you talk about the nice guy
Yeah.
syndrome, right? And people look at Jesus like he was a nice guy. I'm the type of, I have my love glasses on because I see God as love, but I also am able to see, even in those moments where Jesus went into the temple and started whipping things, there was love in that. But
Yep.
we don't know what love looks like because we look at man's label of love and what man says love should look like. So I'm always like, what does God say love looks like? So anyway, so
Beautiful.
you have lots of books. I encourage you guys to go read Jonathan's stuff. It's very easy to understand. I feel like Jonathan definitely has a gift of taking these complex theological concepts and breaking it down into a way that anyone can understand, which is something that I feel like I can do. I can listen to the NT Wrights and, all these super intelligent people. I have to listen to it a few times, but break it down so that it's easy for anyone to understand. But one of the things that I love that you're doing now, like you said, is you're taking what you've learned
Yeah.
and you're now teaching other people. So you have the Bulletproof Husband, you do that focused on men.
Yeah.
This new leadership one that you have, is it co-ed? Like what does it look like and what are you covering in that one?
So one of the things I learned in this process, there's a concept called the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And the hero's journey is you look at stories all around the world. There was an anthropologist named Joseph Campbell, who studied all these cultures, all different time periods, all around the world, and came up with this concept that we're all telling the same story over and over and over and over, whether it's Luke Skywalker or Frodo Baggins, like it's all the same story of the journey from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world and fighting dragons or Darth Vader or Voldemort. Oh, I shouldn't have said his name, but you go through this whole journey and you end up with something, the magic elixir, the sword that glows in the dark. You end up with something and you bring it back and you end up back on Endor or in the Shire. You end up back in the ordinary world, but you're upgraded from the journey and you have something new. Well, I feel like that's the story we see over and over in scripture as well. And it's all of our lives. It's not just some other person. You are the hero of your own story. And so, in part of my story is going from Welton Academy, which was just a knowledge based school with really good teaching and really good knowledge that we were imparting, to now switching to a whole new thing that has been put together that includes the emotional health piece with one of the best emotional coaches from Bulletproof Husband, who's partnering with me, as well as a piece of mentorship so that we have mothers and fathers, leaders that are really solid and healthy, grace filled, Bible based, supernatural leaders, about 20 of them that we've pulled together. And our target is primarily we're aiming for younger people. This program's called Uncommon Leaders.
Mhm.
And it is still a Bible school, but it's a Bible school, it's a mentorship, it's emotional health, all packaged together for the massive price of $0. It's been in my heart for 20 plus years. I remember talking to my wife when we are in early 20s going, I wish there was like a Bible school that was free. Like I would love to do that. And we could never figure it out. It's hard to, have 12 staff members and do a free college. And
Yes.
so we never had a way, we never figured it out before this. But now the Lord's put it on my heart to move forward with this, to trust Him and just go for it. And we'll see. We'll see how this works out. Our main target is 15-year-olds to 30-year-olds for the launch, which is in August of this year, 2025. It'll go for 5 months. They'll get the whole Bible School Foundation, 20 weeks of being a part of a small group program, being part of inner healing, emotional healing, part of the mentorship with these leaders. And so, I mean, you're getting a feast essentially,
And at
and
no cost.
and at no cost.
I
I
didn't
know
know you were doing it at no cost. That's crazy.
I like to be crazy, so I'm going for crazy. So yeah, it's free because especially I look at the young people and I think, Man, there's such a hunger for authenticity in this younger generation, and anything with money and church is like repellent. And I'm,
Right.
hey, let's throw that out of the window. We need to get you trained as leaders. You are, I was thinking about the other day, if this batch of age of people, these are going to be the pastors of the churches that my kids go to. Because my
Yep.
daughters are younger, like 12 and down. And it's like, yes, Jesus, give us the opportunity to reach these leaders and get them healthy so they never have to go through what I went through. And let's get them healthy so that they have a solid foundation, a biblical understanding. They can be powerful people, powerful leaders, and make a huge difference. And I look at what's happening to millennial, Gen X, and boomers right now being shredded by all of these exposures, losing their trust, losing the trust and value of the church, and then we have another wing that's doing all this deconstruction and is just demolishing massive parts of scripture and foundation. And then other people are leaving and going and becoming Orthodox and Anglicans and all this stuff. And it's like, what is happening right now? You know, where all these leaders are falling, deconstruction's happening, people are going back to old traditional stuff and leaving the Holy Spirit behind. And it's like, okay, no, we've got to get to this next generation so that they don't have to deconstruct. They don't
Right.
haven't even constructed yet. So let's construct properly. So
Yes.
you never have to deconstruct. You never have to go through a restoration process. You never have to do these things. So let's get to them younger. Now, the wild thing is, as we've put it out there, the immediate response is, well, I'm like 45 and I really desperately need this. I'm 57 and I need this too. I'm 73 and I need to be a part of this. Okay, okay. So we're trying to figure that out. Right now we've opened it up that we people can apply of all different ages. We're going to do three different categories. So for 31 to 50, there will be a group. For 51 and up,
Okay.
there's another group. So we're going to figure it out. We're going to make this work. But right now, I mean, I'm seeing I need the millennials and the Gen X and the boomers. Help me go find your TikTok kid and get them signed up for this. It'll cost them nothing but their sacrifice and their discipline to be involved. We want them to be given the opportunity, but they have to put themselves into it. They have to put the hard work into it for it to be valued. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge that we're putting out there.
That's awesome. I'm going to let my daughters know. I know that at one of the things that I've noticed, you know, I have teenage daughters, Anna's 18, Alicia's 16, is, and I understand where I live has a huge part to do with what I'm about to say, but I have huge faith in the future because of these kids.
Hmm.
I see a lot of hope in them because they are able to look at it at things in general and call BS.
Yes.
And a lot, I feel like my generation, I'm 43, we came from this strict upbringing. Everything was about appearances, you know, especially if you were in the purity movement, all this stuff. And it created
Yeah.
a lot of fakeness. And I'll think a lot of people struggle with bipolar and stuff like that. It's because of that. They didn't really know who they were. And because of that, you have multiple personalities in a way, right? Who you are
Yeah.
around this person, who you're around that person. And it created this rebellion that we see now with some of the, let's just say that we see in some of the political circles at the moment. The younger and the political correctness and all this stuff, right? The younger kids are like, can we just call it what it is? Like, I don't have time for all this nonsense. Like, you know, so I do have a lot of faith in them because the way churches are designed today, they're more like McDonald's, where you get the same thing over and over and over and over again, nothing deep. A lot of these kids really don't know the Bible.
Yep.
They know the stories per se, you know. I think The Chosen helps a little bit, at least with the life of Jesus, but they don't really know. So, to your point, giving them a place where they can build a foundation. Jesus forgave us for our sins is the basic. It's the very surface level of what Jesus did.
Uh-huh.
And that's what kids know. Jesus came to forgive my sins. And I'm
Mm.
like, there's so much more. And if once you learn what Jesus actually did, and I think the Better Covenant covers that, understanding the whole Bible covers that, it changes everything. And you'll actually live a much more victorious life, which is why I think that your life was changed, because you understood that and you didn't take what Jesus did and used it like a rabbit's tail to be like, oh, it's my good luck charm in Jesus' name, in Jesus' name. You actually paired your faith with the work. You
Yes.
partnered, right?
Yes.
So that is a huge trait for leadership. And I do think that kids need to learn it. So if a lot of my listeners are probably older than your target age group, so for those listening, if you're not in that target age group that he mentioned, you need to share this with someone. I'll put all the links in the show notes so you guys can go look at it. Please share it with people who are younger. I know some of you have nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids who are looking to get deeper with God. I'm telling you right now, Jonathan is a great person to follow because he really makes complicated things easy. It's easy to understand. And one of the things that you're going to get from Jonathan that you're not going to get from church organizations is the practical side of it, how to live life in a way that demonstrates your faith. Because we can all have faith, but if you don't know how to practically live it out, that's where people get anxious and depressed, because there's that conflict between what you believe and what how you live and what you actually believe. And I think Jonathan helps you break it down so you understand exactly why you believe what you believe. That's what it did for me, and I hope that that's what it does for you. So Jonathan, if someone wants to connect with you, look this up, or just connect with you on social media and stuff, how can they do that?
I mean, I'm most active on Facebook. I'm probably tells a lot about my age. I'm 42, and I don't really like Instagram very much. But I'm on Facebook the most, and they can just look up my name. My website is jonwelton.com. And on there, you'll find the link to Uncommon Leaders. You'll find the link to Bulletproof Husband. If somebody listening to this going, oh my gosh, my marriage needs help, my husband needs this, Bulletproof Husband, there's a link there for that. I have a whole page just called Free Stuff, and I have courses I've put out that I've made free and available on the end times, on narcissism and how to detox from it. There's bunch of infographics. There's cool stuff. So I've put a lot of resources on the website to make available for people. But for what we're talking about, I know there's a lot of people who may not be readers nowadays. Almost all my books have been read by me on audiobook. So that's a great option for people too. And my goodness, we've covered a lot of ground here, Andrea. I've really enjoyed this podcast together. Thank you for having me.
Wow, this conversation may have brought up a lot for you. Maybe it was hard to hear. Maybe it was healing. Maybe it challenged the way you see leadership and restoration, or maybe yourself. It possibly was triggering, and I get that. But the intention of this conversation isn't to open up wounds or to rehash Jonathan's story. It really is about sparking hope. Hope that anyone can change. Hope that God isn't done with anyone. And if we do the work, God will show up. Hope that we have a next generation of leaders that are rising up to break these patterns and talk about things that the conventional church is not talking about. If you're the kind of leader that wants that, if you're looking to be a leader and you need training, especially if you're between the ages of 15 and 30, I highly recommend that you check out Jonathan's course, Uncommon Leaders. You can get more information at jonwelton.com. That's jonwelton.com. You can find the link in the show notes. Go get more information. And remember, it's free. He's providing this at no cost. So if this conversation sparked something in you and you identified with Jonathan, Or maybe you're like me and you were someone on the other side of this story, but you saw the hope that Jonathan has to offer and you see the change in his life and what he has to share, then go check out the information. Or maybe you know someone between the ages of 15 and 30 and you're thinking, wow, this is a great opportunity for them and it's free. Share it with them as well. Thank you so much for being at this table and having the conversation. I know it may not have been easy, but I thank you for being open to hear and to witness the change that Jonathan has gone through. Next week, Mike and I are going to continue our conversation about the Sermon on the Mount in the Jesus Speaks series. We're going to dive into that phrase in the prayer that says, lead us not into temptation. We're going to break it down because does God lead us into temptation? And I really believe that today's conversation is going to help us go a little bit deeper into that and really understand what the conversation is all about between Mike and I. Until then, I encourage you to keep seeking the truth, walking in wholeness, and step into your destiny. Bye.